wait a moment here and just check, because it is an item we're going to see twice in the later part of the report. So are we quite sure we all got no conflicts of interest? No. No? All right, so we'll move on there. The confirmation of the minutes. Can I have someone move and second that they are accurate? We accept those before we just...
I'm happy to move.
So Danny and Kathy, I've got... Are you picking all this up, Nicole? Hopefully that's a yes. Yep. Nicole, you're okay?
Yes, I am.
Up? Yep. Okay. I just want to double check.
Can you hear me?
All right. Yeah. Yeah, I can. Okay. All right. We'll carry on then. So we're now on page 4, which is the minutes of the last meeting. Most of it was straightforward. We've got Audit New Zealand, who is now reporting to us today. Oh, by the way, Audit New Zealand saying Leon, was it Petershare? He's not here till 10:45. So we might just sort of jiggle the reports as we go through to fit in with his timing. So we possibly might go beyond his report and then come back to it. We'll see. There was another item in here at the bottom of the page 5 about the audit of Destination Great Lake Taupo and the Airport Authority. Has that been done, or I can address it to Leon later on? Andrew, do you know if that's been done?
Not completed yet.
Okay, but otherwise it's on target for this month?
Jeanette, on target for this month, or maybe a little bit delayed? I think a little bit delayed.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, sorry, yes, I think it's being done in April.
April, okay, all right. So, otherwise, there were no further matters. Should we move on then to item 4.1, which is Rhino with a Pulse Safe Audit Report. Have we got Rhino here? I'm just looking on my screen. Well, Steve, is Steve?
Yep, both Rhino and I are on, Anthony.
Oh, okay. I'm just, is Rhino or Steve, do you want to just, is there one or two things you want to say? I mean, we can take the report as read, so I don't think we need to go through it, but anything sort of, if anything, one or 2 points you might want to make, or we'll take questions.
Rhino, do you want to say anything there, or are you happy for me to speak?
Oh, you can, yeah, go for it, Steve.
Go for it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Anthony. Really quickly, we'll take the paper as read, but the reason for the Pulse Safe audit, it's a great independent check of our compliance annually. It is a KPI for the pool, so we are measured by our elected members, so the importance of having there to measure against that, and also provides a really good benchmark for our pools against other pools from around the country. Ryan and the team have passed again this year, and I think it's a great reflection on the good work they're doing down there. Thank you.
I mean, I agree entirely. Congratulations, terrific job. And I gather, Rhino, you're going to teach other people how to do this now, or you're going to do it elsewhere, are you?
Yes, teaching people is another thing. I am a Pulse Safe auditor, so yes, I have audited in the last probably 3-4 weeks. I've done about 13 pools.
Yep.
And I can say that our standard is excellent. That is from staffing, knowledge, our quality of our water, our plant assets. Yes, all up to standard and above standard compared to the 13 others I've done.
Okay. And the other thing I just noted was this is voluntary. So, I mean, I guess you're doing it within your work, but there's an element of voluntary work about this, is there?
Yes, my part is voluntary. So they did approach me a few years ago and this year again to audit, but we volunteer time and at their cost, and we move down and do it at our time. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, indeed.
Any questions or comments others would like to make here?
Can I just make a comment, Anthony?
it's Kathy here. Just I noticed under the supervision criteria that all lifeguards must hold a valid PLSA or a PLPC. But under the comments, I noted lifeguards or staff members who do not hold a current PLSA or PLPC, and I noted that they won't be on a roster, but could you just clarify that for me?
Yes, so there's basically your PLPC is your full qualification, which is renewed every 2 years. PoolSafe requires all lifeguards to be trained or participate in training every 3 months. Therefore, we check on their qualifications. If they do not hold that full qualification in our standard operating procedures and as required by PoolSafe, they are not allowed to be rostered. In other words, if we do put them on, they have to be shadowing a fully qualified lifeguard. So it normally takes about 2 weeks to get them qualified and about a month to have them good enough to be on poolside independently. Yeah, so we don't roster and we don't normally employ people who can't be qualified. If they take longer than a month, they normally won't be employed anymore.
Oh, thanks, Rano, for that clarification.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Thanks, Ryan. Yes, obviously, it's probably maybe not a contradiction, but it seems a bit confusing to me anyway. Obviously, you've got under your central components, naturally lifeguards in charge must have an understanding of the rationale behind procedure and the grasp of the information contained in the procedure. That's probably obviously good enough. That's excellent, but it's got lifeguards are not required to know, even recognise the technical terms, which is probably reasonable, or even names of procedure. Can you just clarify that?
Yes. So when you normally deal with lifeguards, you have a range of experience. And what I also saw with the other pools is as soon as you have newer lifeguards, they won't necessarily know the terminology, but they will understand the actual action. For instance, if there is our famous one, a code brown in the pool, they will know how to follow the steps, but they won't actually understand unless they've been there for quite some time, the actual terminology behind it. So that's what they're referring to. During conversations with lifeguards, we normally focus on the team leaders or those lifeguards that have been there for a substantial amount of time. And we expect from them to be, and I think further down on the document, it actually states that the senior lifeguards or team leaders must have extensive knowledge and must understand everything.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks, Ryan.
Mr. Chair, could I ask Ryan, excellent report. Thank you to yourself and Steve, and well done. Congratulations. Just to clarifying the audit team of the 13, did you say 13 other pools?
Yes, 13, yes.
What, through the country?
Mostly this time the audits were done in Upper Hutt, Lower Hutt, all the Hutt City pools, and then up to Masterton, and then in Napier, Hastings, and yeah.
So you go and physically visit those, Rhino?
Yes, I physically go down and I get a roster. I have to pre the visit. There's a huge amount of work that needs to be done, checking their SOPs, EAPs, pool risk management plans, all the documentation. Then you actually go to site and through a tablet, you basically tick off, have conversations. They have to show you proof of first aid certificates. Yes, so physically visiting.
So, sorry to go directly on this, but do you do this on your days off or something, or is it how does it work? Do they pay us for this, or?
No, this is a contribution contributing to the industry. So on those days, the council actually gives me a day or two off to fly down at their cost, of course, and to perform those audits. And the same is done from PoolSafe side to us. Most of the checks I do when I move through the documents is in my spare time, that is on weekends or after hours. Yep.
Okay. as long as you're not out of pocket. And yeah, okay, sorry.
No, not at all. Not
Yeah,
at all.
okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
We can do Bitcoin transactions at this stage if you want, David.
Barter card. What's wrong with barter card?
Okay.
Maybe in
All right.
rubles.
Okay, yeah, no, it'd be nice to get some acknowledgement from those councils, I suppose, that, you know, that you're performing these. I just hope you're getting looked after. That's the main thing.
Absolutely, yes, we do. We do get feedback from them. The positive is during the visits you experience and you actually see how they do it. There's their procedures, policies, action plans, and standards, and that is a good benchmark. And some of that we bring back and we incorporate it into our own documents. Yes.
Cool.
Okay, any further questions or comments, or move on and have someone move and second we receive Rhino's report? Have someone move? Oh, Christine down there and John. Yep. Okay, we'll move. Thanks, Rhino and Steve.
Thank you very much.
We'll move on to 4.2, Jamie, on page 29, the sensitive expenditure policy. Jamie, again, it's fairly comprehensive. I guess all you really need to do, from my mind, is just say a little word about those 3 items marked X.
Okay.
Unless you feel there's something else you want to highlight.
No, I'll just point out the committee for information that's during this period we changed in October last year to CI Anywhere, so the information was spread out over 2 different areas, and I'm wondering whether using the new system, as people are finding their way, one of the things they may have overlooked is actually putting that level of detail into their purchase orders, which is important. So a lot of the issues surrounding the food and meals and refreshment and hospitality is largely related to that not supplying sufficient information on their purchase orders to identify what the actual purchase was for. We've had some discussions about this one, and I need to reinforce that it's essential to actually have that detail, because one of the key principles of the sensitive expenditure policy is maintaining that transparency. And the only way you can get that is if you actually record and identify why you're expending the money. Because so it's important to actually abide by the policy and only spend it for the right purposes, but also record that you're actually recording compliance, and that's primarily documenting the reasons on your purchase orders or requisitions for that purchase. So in terms of the meals and refreshments, it's largely please identify what it's for, and I understand we are working on some guidance on that to sit with the policy to give that detailed guidance as to when the purchasing of food can be linked to the council's business. And I am mindful that we are engaging in a lot of consultation with the community, and part of that consultation, the provision of food and hospitality is a very big part of that moving forward. So it's worthwhile having that guidance. And the question of uniforms, again, without a uniform policy, any clothing is identified as clothing which is outside the policy. But I understand there is a uniform policy being worked on, and once that's in place and it's applied consistently, that should fall away, and that would be not something which would crop up, would be shown up as a non-compliance. And hence my recommendations at the very end again is uniform policy, and remind staff to actually put clear explanations as to what the expenditure is for when it's sensitive expenditure. And that would address those 3 issues. Okay,
thanks, Jamie. Any questions, comments?
Mr. Chair, I wouldn't think it'd be that hard if you're buying food for someone or something like that too. Wouldn't be that hard to put out and down who it's for and all that sort of thing. It's quite a bit of non-compliance here, Jamie. You would think that if there's a receipt, it wouldn't be that hard to identify who it was for and what have you, would you think?
You would hope so. But if you're purchasing staff for a council staff event or something for staff to consume, it would be nice to actually know, is it a meeting or what is it? Is it a celebration of, we're just not getting that information.
Yeah, surely that's not that hard.
Sorry, just through the chair, I was going to sort of say the same, and it does sound a little bit petty because obviously it's probably not a huge amount, but it is still compliance. I suppose the question is, when you drill it down, is it repeat offending, if you like, call the word, or is it just different people at different times and it is just a case of not enough info?
It's just simply a case of not enough info. I wouldn't say it's repeat offending. I don't know what the circumstances behind it are, but we were very good historically. We have been very good in this area, and maybe it's time we just need to send that reminder out again.
Okay.
Through the chair, thanks, Jamie. Perhaps offending is perhaps not the right term. Just clarifying what John's saying, what is legitimate, and so I think clarifying it in the policy would be ideal.
Yeah, I agree. Offending is not the right word. I just didn't think of the word that I could use.
I think through Mr. Chairman, I think when you go back and retrospectively interrogate the staff about it, here's a receipt. You haven't filled out all the details. What was that for? Then there's always a response, and there's always a good outcome and a good reason for it. But of course, Jamie, when he's measuring compliance of the policy, can't go back to that level. It should be all on it should be given to him at the time of purchase. So that becomes an education thing for the staff member. So it's not an indication of anything going wrong. It's simply any wrongdoing. It's simply a administrative error of those staff not writing down enough details for Jamie to be able to look at it as a neutral third party to be able to say, okay, I understand what that's for. So it's an administrative error, but education appears to be the solution.
Just through the chair, can I ask Jamie, when people are actually purchasing, they're not just purchasing on a whim, that this actually goes through someone else?
Yes, we have a one-up principle. So if I'm purchasing, it has to go up to the person above me with the financial delegation. So there is that oversight. It's just we've just missed it a little bit to actually make sure that could this be considered sensitive expenditure? If the answer is yes, I need to document clearly what it was for.
Through the chair, I don't want to belabor the point. I think it might be useful, I think, for whoever is supervising those, the data entry, I guess the side of it is really falling down, to be doing that on a sort of monthly basis, or when they're doing the credit cards, rather than just our 6 monthly process. I'm assuming we're sort of doing that anyway, but that should hopefully over time improve our stats, for want of a better word.
Through Mr. Chairman, it's credit cards don't appear to be the issue. It's through the purchase order system. Okay. The credit card, people who hold credit cards are well aware of their obligations, and they make pretty good records.
Okay. Any further issues there? Comments, questions? All right. Thank you, Jamie. I'll just ask someone to move and second that we receive this report. Danny and Anna, thank you. Jamie, just don't move. Don't leave the chair yet. So I'll just repeat what I said earlier, that Leon's not joining us to 10:45, so we've got another 24 minutes. So what I'd like to do is to move to item 4.5. 4.5 is on page 80 of the notes, the agenda. It's the strategic risk register, which we were talking about last week. In doing so, I've missed over 4.3, which is Leon's report, so we'll come back to that when he's here. And I've also purposely missed out 4.4, which is a schedule of a work plan. I'd prefer to do that last. I think after we've talked through all of these issues, it'd be nice just to recap what we're going to do, or Jamie and the team are going to do next. So, Jamie, if you would, any comments you'd like to make there about 4.5, the strategic risk register? And again, thank you for all your work you've done there.
Thank you. So this is the strategic risk register, which we discussed at our last workshop. We've gone through and made the amendments and revisited the scores. After discussion with the committee, we thought our assessment of the scores early on were a little bit harsh and didn't necessarily reflect the effects of the treatments we have currently in place. So as you see, we've gone through, and some of them have now dropped out of high down to medium residual risk as our assessments. And we also changed some of the terminologies in the matrix from the terms catastrophic risk to severe risk, because catastrophic is fairly emotive. I think we think severe risk outcomes are more reflective of what we're talking about. So really, we're just looking for the committee to receive this register, which will form the basis of our risk reporting for this current 2022 year. Sorry.
And just before I open it to questions and comments, Jamie, this is the register this committee is going to see this every meeting this year, aren't we? So this is not something that's going to be parked for the next 12 months. We won't see again. It'll be here again in June.
If that's the committee's wish, yeah. we can do that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So any questions or comments?
I was quite interested in seeing the bow tie graphs attached to it, if that's helpful. Not today, but yeah, just
sure. We can do that.
Useful, just because I wasn't able to attend the meeting the other day. The only other thing would be, I'm assuming there's a whole separate piece of work in terms of, if we use the example of ineffective relationship with community around what actions they're looking at doing within the different departments within council. That's, I mean, they'll be in the strategic area or something like that, but yeah, I think it's helpful.
Okay.
To keep these things in front of us.
I think we went through this quite extensively last week, and maybe it's more useful to move on to the next item, which would be looking at the top risks at the moment. If that was correct, or is it? I've lost myself here. Yeah, 4.6. For a start then, so we've got the risk register. Can I have someone move and second, please, that we receive the risk register? That's Kathy and Christine, I can see on the screen. Okay, so we move on then to 4.6, which is on page 84. And now we're looking at the risk register report for this month, where well, my understanding is we're highlighting what we believe some of the top risks are at the present. But Jamie, again, you want to say a few words there?
Thank you. This just leads on from what we discussed at the workshop. Is we have this template we've sort of put forward as proposed to report on the risks and their current statuses. So we've looked at the strategic risks, the current risk drivers, those risk drivers, the impact on the organisation, and the controls we currently have or are planning to put in place, and then looked at the risk status, whether it's been altered from the risk register or not. So just running through these, I've put these in order so they should show from high to low in terms of risks. I must add there is one risk, ineffective relationship with the community, which we've stated on this report that it's high, but it's actually medium, it's yellow, because of controls in place. So if we start at the first one, inadequate preparation for change, no surprises there. Change is a big issue for our council as well as many other neighbouring councils across New Zealand. So our current risk drivers, we feel are driving this is we've got the legislative reform around 3 waters.
Sorry, Jamie, can I don't think we need to go through it all, but I think probably maybe if people got questions or comments, that
Sure.
might be a
Okay.
more interactive way to do it. Any comments or questions from others? I mean, there's a lot of change out there, which we're all well aware of. I guess the key thing is it's not so much are we doing enough, but it is the assessment. Well, it is are we doing enough, but is the assessment in front of us also reasonable? We've adequately described what the risks are. We consider what those impacts are and thought about what controls are in place, and still, after all doing all that, we still think it's very high. Well, not very high, it's high.
Just through the chair, I think when we talked about it the other day, the failure to obviously attract and retain competent workforce, I personally think that's probably as high as we can go, because we talked about this. This isn't going to go away, and actually it's critical if we actually start losing staff and can't function. So to me, as an ongoing risk, it would be one of the highest that we've got, and something that we couldn't just rectify. So it has to have a lot of work put into it.
So that's the third item on Jamie's list. I don't think that was seen in any ranking, was it, Jamie? There were 3 risks seen as very high, and one of those was the around the workforce.
Yeah, the workforce is treated as high, and it's largely high if I go to the heat map because of the likelihood and the consequences. Yeah, so there's equally the likelihood and the consequences are fairly high, whereas the change is 5. Likelihood for the likelihood of change is getting right to that severe, and the consequences are right up there. So change is it's high, but it's slightly higher. It's in terms of the high band, it's slightly higher than competent workforce, but they are effectively both high, and they should be looked upon to be taking our priority of our over some of the other things.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I still go back to something I said last week, and I think as much as council's endeavouring to try and attract more staff, I don't see that as. I mean, I'm not optimistic that'll solve the problem, and I just question whether it's at a stage of where you have to question how we do things, what we do. You know, it may actually be going back to saying, well, this is what the community are asking us to do in terms of service, but it may be getting to a stage of saying, well, this is not reasonable. I don't know. Is it worth opening that discussion?
Well, just through the chair, I think that comes back to the inadequate preparation for change, given some of the things that are going on, particularly around the local government reforms. So doing things differently, absolutely.
Through the chair, I think we do see a really strong interrelationship at the moment between challenges that we have with attracting and retaining a workforce and the amount of change that's going on in our industry. One is fueling the other. In particular, the change that's being imposed by Three Waters and other changes is unsettling for the workforce, and that's problematic. There's also some local pressures with housing and things which are problematic. But although that risk is high at the moment around attracting and retaining a workforce, we are delivering well at the moment. We're delivering a record amount of infrastructure deployment. We're delivering to nearly all of our service level requirements. We are delivering well in a period where we have challenges with our workforce. So I think it's a risk which is being managed at the moment, and we can tell that it's being managed because we continue to deliver. But it's just flagging on this risk report that it is high, and it's one that we're putting quite a bit of effort, and it's consuming quite a bit of management time at the moment.
It's probably a good place to also raise an issue that Leon raised in his report, and I didn't fully understand it, but Andrew and others may. Is this seem to be a requirement to hire New Zealanders? Or does anyone know a bit more about that? I mean, there was a comment in there. It seemed to imply rather than go seek new people as migrants, which has only just recently or soon will be available again, that we make more effort to go local. Is that a constraint or an issue or something that we need to think about?
Perhaps a question for Leon when he.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, our employment requirements around immigration status and so on are the same as private business at the moment.
Okay. All right. All right. We'll leave that to later. The other major risks in here around ineffective relationship with the community. Jamie's noted that it was actually the residual risk is medium, not high, as it's coloured. Any further comment about that? Okay. Workplace safety, it's an ongoing sort of issue. It's always will be there. Failure to manage the council's finances, medium. I'm not sure. I mean, is medium a reasonable estimate of that? I mean, because we can't manage carbon, well, it's because there's an uncertainty risk around carbon credits, supply chain, fuel prices. That seemed to me pretty standard stuff, I would have thought.
For the chair, yeah, that's all reasonably standard stuff. That's reasonable. It's always an area where we have a reasonable amount of risk, particularly big transactions like carbon credits, which have the cost of carbon to us has tripled really in the last 12 months. So it's a fairly steeply rising cost. And of course, we need to try and continue to balance our budget. I think we're also seeing some challenges around us where some of our peers, some of our neighbouring councils have seen challenges with levels of COVID disruption, which we've managed through to this point in time. But I've recently highlighted to council in my performance report last month that we're watching very closely, particularly around expenditure and revenue, to make sure that those are tracking as we expect them to. So.
Sorry, a question for you, Andrew, was also, I mean, I noticed there was reference to forward purchases of carbon credits. Is there a hedging policy around that, or is it or has that just been done on a whim, or how does that work?
Definitely not been done on a whim. There is a hedging. Well, there's a policy set out in the Treasury Management Policy.
Okay. Yep.
How we work with credits, and we have essentially a requirement to progressively purchase carbon credits as we move through the financial year, so that we have coverage in place as we go. As it is at the moment, we're fairly well stocked on carbon credits. In fact, we've fully purchased for this financial year because we were concerned that the price was going up. So, operating within the policy, we've purchased our requirement to surrender for the 2022 financial year.
So is this sort of a rolling 12 months forward policy, or an 18 months forward, or 5 year?
No, it's 12 months really.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And you're happy with that? I mean, other than it being a risk, are you sort of comfortable with the way it's working?
We're not happy with the prices.
No.
Anybody who's subject to the carbon regime is happy with the prices at the moment, but the policy works. How it has worked reasonably well for us, so outstanding in the past. And we've just before Christmas, we revised a couple of things in the Treasury Management Policy around my delegation to purchase carbon credits and carbon instruments, so that we could purchase in larger amounts. And I think that's good. That has given us quite a bit more flexibility to, get in there when the price is okay, and get those purchases made.
Through the chair, you're notwithstanding all that commentary regarding our current risk drivers, and sometimes controls can get out of hand, taken away from you. Currently, what's our Standards & Poor's credit ratings? AA+, I believe. So it stands us in good stead in terms of it's high up. It's one of the highest in the country, I believe, at the moment. But I do appreciate things can change rapidly, with COVID, etc.
I guess there's sort of the flip side of this. I mean, the reason I'm asking, I hadn't thought the council was involved in this. What can council do to reduce the need for the carbon credits, or is that asking too much?
No, that's not asking too much. It's certainly, so there's a couple of things going on. There's council's working at the moment on a policy in relation to climate change, and part of that policy will talk about our options for reducing our carbon footprint and reducing our carbon output. That'll reduce the number of credits that we require every year. And there's also a couple of capital projects, the largest, which are to do with reducing carbon. The largest of those in the long-term plan is the construction of a gas flare at the landfill that will flare gas and reduce our requirement to purchase credits to offset gas that we produce there.
And what are the highest emitters? Is it the landfill? Is it transport?
There's a carbon, so we have had a carbon inventory done where we can make that available. The highest is by far is the landfill. That produces a significant amount of methane and other greenhouse gases. And there's also there's quite a bit of carbon that comes from wastewater treatment as well.
Okay. All right. And the last item on that list was compliance, and what seems to be a theme coming up, and we'll talk about this shortly, procurement seemed to be the theme of this report. Came through very much in a number of items, and that's coming through again in this liability here. So maybe we've got, is there any further questions there? What I was going to suggest is we do go back and just look at that schedule for the year. And then by then, Leon's probably going to be joining us. So if there's no further questions about the report, do I have someone move and second that we receive the Strategic Risk Register report for March? So John, I've got Williamson and Anna I see below. Yep. Thank you. So if we go back, sorry to be chopping and changing here, go back to page 76, item 4.4, we have a work plan for the year. So thank you for doing this also, Jamie. It's nice to see, it certainly appeals to me to see the big picture. Anything you want to, a couple of points you want to make there? Or?
Thank you, Chairman. This just really, I think it would probably replace that outstanding item we used to have, which is the schedule of policies and procedures. So that should fall within this, but it also picks up other work which the committee would be involved in, and tries to outline the work forward for the year for each meeting as to items the committee should see in front of them. And it allows also the staff to make sure that we are covering everything we should cover. What in front of you, what we've got there, everything in black is largely what we are currently doing. And there are some items in red with asterisks, which are policies which we have reported in the past, but not regularly. And sort of we're putting those forward as items which possibly the committee should be hearing from the staff on. We've got the procurement policy. It's something which the committee may want to determine whether we should be doing a regular report on procurement. Our protected disclosures reporting, our fraud reporting, those are largely, we've done them in the past as annual report, just to run through, make sure that that we are adhering to those policies correctly. And then there's two other items there, which is an insurance strategy and insurance update, which those are matters which we are currently working on with Aon to come up with a report and a strategy for the committee to consider in the future.
So just to sort of avoid any confusion before we sort of get into some detail of the, so that on about the 6th or 7th line there, there's an asset disposal policy says due March. That's not, we're not doing that today, are we?
No, we're not doing that today.
Okay.
There is some additional work we need to do on that.
So are we expecting to see that in June or September, or?
We would hope so, to be in the next meeting.
Okay, and then down on the next block under risk management, the same again, the insurance strategy is not today, that'll be in June.
Yes, that would be our expectations that we would have in front of the committee.
And the opposite of that, below that, we've got the pool safe, we've had that today and not in June.
Yes.
Okay, so any questions or comments people want to make here?
Yeah, just through the chair, with the asset disposal policy, might want to change the year.
Yes. Instead of March 21, it's going to be June 22. Yeah. Any further comments, questions?
Yeah, well, through the chair, obviously under risk management, the strategic risk register in September, is that just an update, or it's not a policy decision, is it? Or getting pretty close to the election? It's not a policy decision, just an update.
Yes, the expectation is that it just be an update.
Okay, thanks, Jamie.
There are a couple of, I had hoped to talk about this after Leon, but we may as well talk about it now while we're waiting. It says in Leon's report, we're reviewing the sensitive expenditure policy, and yet we're saying it's not due till March 24. This is the third or fourth line down. Is that, what is the status? What are we doing there?
That was reviewed last year, or 2021.
Okay.
2020. Sorry, it has been reviewed, yes.
So those comments that Leon's making in his reports are referring to the guidelines from Audit New Zealand. That's already been included in the review we did last year.
Yes, we did a review last year.
Yep.
There were significant amendments made based on that report, that information from the Audit New Zealand.
Yep.
There's a lot of the recommendations put by Audit New Zealand are largely a part of result of when they looked at the sensitive expenditure policy. They looked at it. I felt they looked at it in isolation, and a lot of the recommendations we have are also contained in other policies. So we have conflicts of interest policy, we have procurement policies, and they all need to be looked together rather than just one policy.
Okay, but the key thing is though that it has been done. We've addressed those issues.
Yes. It has been done. We're comfortable that we've reviewed the good practice guidance on the sensitive expenditure. It's just that good practice guidance is reflected across a number of different policies.
Okay.
So we're going to do a little bit of a reconciliation to show that we've considered all of that guidance, and we'll run that back up to this committee just practice.
And the same applies to the next item, the conflicts of interest guidelines. In Leon's reports, it's something we are reviewing apparently. So is this just a mismatch of timing here in terms of what we're looking at? We've already done it. Is that again the case?
We have a conflicts of interest guidelines for the staff are due for review in 2023. So they must have been reviewed. I'm not familiar with the policy, so I'll have to actually check on that one.
Look,
Anthony, rather than reviewing the policy, we're reviewing our practice of how we capture that information.
Okay, all right. Hi, Leon, I see you've joined us. We may as well just finish this item, if you don't mind, and then we'll turn our attention to you. Thank you. The same sort of issue here, the procurement policy is due in 24. And yet there's a lot of items in Leon's report which is referring to the need to address procurement. Do we need to bring that forward again, or is it something that's been done elsewhere?
I'm not familiar with procurement policy. I remember Daniel gave a report to the committee, an update, and some last year.
Right. Okay, well, I think we'll have a bit more information about that when we get into Leon's audit report. Is there any other comments or questions people have about the work plan for this year? If not, can I have someone please move and second that we receive this proposed work plan? Annie, and there's another hand there somewhere. Christine, thank you. Okay, that leaves one item left in this part of the report, and I suspect it'll take a little while, given I counted up 63 issues, items, matters, points, whatever. Anyway, Leon, it's lovely to have you here. What is like you to do, this is, where are we, page 34. We have your report. It can be taken as read. What I would like to do is pretty much go through it page by page, just so we can, and a lot of those pages we'll flick through quickly, but there might be some we get stuck on for a little while. But before we do that, is there any sort of, one or two points you want to make?
Good day, Mr. Chair, and thanks. I hope I wasn't late.
No, you weren't late at all. On time.
Perfect. Yeah, take the report as read, because it is quite lengthy, and we got some feedback from management as well about the length of the report and the wordiness of it, which we took on board and we'll definitely look at next year. And something else we'll be working closely with Andrew and his team with is which of these items can we actually start closing? Because some, we understand that you are willing to take a risk on certain of the items where it's a beneficial finding. It doesn't add value to the organizer, to the council to address it if you take it from a cost perspective. And from that perspective, we'll work with Andrew to close a number of those, probably the more beneficial findings. That said, I think I've said enough, and I'd rather take any questions or comments.
Sorry, Christine, did you have a question? Or? Oh, no, sorry, I just turned around and saw a hand movement. Yeah, if you don't mind, I think, are people happy if we just go through page by page? I think it'll be less confusing that way. Otherwise, we're just going to be going backwards and forwards. And as I say, hopefully we can tick off some of them very quickly. So if we didn't, what I've got in front of me is page 39, which is page 5 for you, probably, Leon. You've probably only got your original report, have you? You haven't got our...
No, I've got an agenda as well.
Have you got, okay, so if I just refer to page 39, I'm referring to our agenda.
Sorry,
yes, Danny.
The only key one that I've got is actually on page 37, just the a high level discussion around not being able to rely on controls.
Good point. I had overlooked that page. Yep.
Wasn't able to necessarily link that with the main substantive part of the audit report. Are you happy to touch on it when it comes up, Leon, or?
Absolutely. Yep.
Because what I'm hoping is that with future audits, you will be able to rely on the controls to make your life easier in terms of your audit. And I mean, obviously there's key ones like the payroll, which will be probably quite tangible, but just in general, if that's the kind of place I think we'd like to get to if we can. So
yeah, I think it also relates to the changes you're making at the moment. Project Quantum, as well as the FMIS changes, and all those will have an impact on controls going forward. And we're looking for the 2022 audit. We've got our IT auditor in to see which changes have been made and are there automated controls that we can rely on. And then when we send the team in, are there any other controls that we can actually rely on? Because it is more efficient to do a controls-based approach. You're quite right.
Okay, well, what I'd suggest we do is as we go through Appendix 1 later on, if you at the time, Leon, can just identify which ones relate back to that control mechanism. But for now, are you happy with that, Danny? We'll move forward. Yep. Okay, thanks. The performance measures we'll cover later on. This is on page 37. The valuation of the infrastructure was good. All right, so back to page 39. We've got those new recommendations at the bottom of the page there. The first two relate to the capitalisation of expenses, or what would otherwise be treated as operating expenses. That's in the appendix, so we'll come back to that. The risk register, we've got one of those already, so that's pretty much compliant. The fourth item there, 4.4, has got asset engineers follow up on work requests documented in Asset Finder. this seems, I mean, this is, I guess, an ongoing issue. Where are we at with that? And is this something that we're going to address, or is Quantum going to fix it, or is it going to take something else to do it? I guess we'll start with you, Andrew, and unfortunately you're the man on the spot. Oh, is he here?
Sorry, I didn't know if you were asking Leon there. It's absolutely something we're going to address. There's some comments in there talking about it further on. It's not going to be solved by Quantum. This is largely a training piece and just a process quality piece around following up on infrastructure fixes, engineers following up on infrastructure fixes. Really, it's probably where the rubber hits the road with some staff challenges. We've just been talking about that earlier on, but certainly it's one of those areas where engineers are busy deploying infrastructure, and sometimes we drop the ball on just confirming that things have been closed with contractors. And so Leon and his team have quite rightly picked up that we can improve our performance there. So I think it's about performance rather than system change or automation. Like that.
Okay, so I guess, sorry, Leon.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. No, I agree with that, because there is a process in place. And what we're basically saying, formalizing this process to ensure everyone follows that process, exactly what Andrew's saying.
Okay, so I guess this committee can take assurance that work's being done by staff to address this. Yep, I see the nod, Andrew. Good. So the next one below that was annual leave, and annual leave comes up again later on in terms of the calculation of it, but this is about the taking of it. Again, I suppose, I mean, I don't want to put it back to you all the time, Andrew, but if you think of a person you want to deflect this question to, feel free to.
I'm happy to also deflect them. So the annual leave piece, auditors have raised that we need a good process for encouraging people to take annual leave. We do already have a process in place. It wasn't in place for all of the last financial year, but certainly at the moment we are getting regular reports out to managers to let them know where they have employees with excessive annual leave balances. In our parlance at the moment, more than 30 days or 6 weeks of accrued annual leave we're determined to be an excessive balance. And what we do is we ask the manager to make a plan with the employee to take some of that leave. It is very tricky at the moment. Staff are reluctant to take leave, and it's a global phenomenon with travel restrictions and COVID and what have you. And at the moment, with the significant amount of infrastructure with deployment we've got going on, we've got a good number of people around the council who are just too busy, and some of them probably enjoying their work and engaged and not feeling like they can take leave. So that's where those leave plans come in place. It's about managers having conversations with people, making sure they're aware they can take leave, working out ways we can cover their duties while they're away, so that we do have a healthy amount of consumption of leave. And I guess the financial flip side of that is we try and limit that liability from continuing to grow the balance sheet.
But, I mean, I guess the way I look, I mean, I'm less concerned about the financial liability aspect and more concerned about, is it a symptom? Is it sort of the canary in the forgotten the metaphor now, in the mine? Is there an underlying stress issue here, or overwork issue, or it's a bit sad also that people just can't take time off and they have to go on a trip to justify a holiday. Anyway, I'm being flippant. More seriously, yeah.
You're right that it's a global phenomenon at the moment. So.
Can I just confirm, Chair, sorry, because I don't know the policy on the actual leave. Is there actually a policy on block leave? And the reason I ask that is because I work for a bank where you had to take 2 weeks in a row. You couldn't just take a Monday and a Friday, because the health and well-being of the staff to the company was you can't have a true break unless it is a, if you like, 10-day break. Do we do that?
Well, we sort of, no, we don't, as far as I know, unless Gareth, you know otherwise, but as far as I know, we don't do that. We do have a period over Christmas, which is essentially 2 weeks over Christmas, where we have a large number of the staff take that period off. And part of the reason they take that is we do give 3 extra days of leave in there. The 3 days between Christmas and New Year are additional leave for our staff. So they do take that time off, and most staff do get 2 weeks of uninterrupted leave over that summer period. Unfortunately, that doesn't reduce the leave balance. It kind of does the opposite, actually. But to answer your direct question, John, no, we don't have that block leave policy. We do have the other thing that we're doing around encouraging the consumption of leave is encouraging people to make use of the right that they have to have a week's leave paid out, and that is helpful for some people, and some do take us up on that, and we are encouraging that at the moment. Current legislation in New Zealand limits that to one week per 12-month period, though. So employees are not able to cash up. Employees with these larger leave balances are not able to cash those out. So it's not great in terms of reducing the leave balance, but it is helpful to some staff.
Yes, just to add to that, when we do get into that place, John, is in the leave plans that we come up with. So people with excess leave, then we'll very often, we will be looking at, can we encourage you to have a long period, obviously to get the leave down, but also from that rest and relaxation perspective. So, those councillors on the call, Kevin Strongman talked about one of our staff members today who just happened to come back from leave from November and is back on the fold now because that person had an excessive amount of leave, so went away for a couple of month period. So that's sort of the when we're in the leave planning situation, it's around what big chunks can we have combined with buying leave out. As Andrew said, very supportive of us buying leave out, but only if the staff members also taking leave, actual holidays at the same time to be able to get that rest.
Okay, I guess we could discuss this for ages, but I think we better move on. I don't know we're going to resolve it any further now. Page 40, depreciation rates, I guess that's been sorted. We've got this asset disposal policy we'll mention later on. There's a one-up approval, which we do have in place, but there was only one exception. Am I correct about that? I think I see you nodding there, Leon.
Yeah, from our review, it was only the one. And okay. I think if looking at the management's comments on that one as well is rather important.
Okay, all right, we'll come back to that. We'll see that later on. The conflicts of interest, it comes up again later on as well, but I think while it's in front of us, we have a register, but is it my understanding we have a register, but it's not been fully completed? And why it's an issue, full stop, but it seems to me as we get into some of these procurement issues later on, it's going to be even more of an issue as we go forward. So it's probably better to tidy it up now. Leon, what's your understanding here?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was at Select Committee last week with the Criminal Cases Review Commission, and they also asked me about conflict of interest. So I think I need to be a bit clearer here. We do not see this as such a huge risk, but there is a risk. And we, as auditors, as conservative auditors, have to mention that risk to you and say you haven't completed all your or declared all your interests. Not all these interests relate to entities you do business with or have procurement with. So the risk, in my opinion, isn't that big that it's a huge thing. It is more something I just wanted to remind you of, and that's why I put that in my report.
Okay. Did Andrew or Gareth want to reply to that, or anyone in particular?
No, I think that's right, Anthony. I think there's some reasonably minor things which gave rise to this finding, as Leon says, and I think it's important that we're really clean on conflict of interest. I think one of the things that we might think about improving is the timeliness or the cadence with which we ask people about conflicts of interest. one of the instances of non-compliance was where somebody had become associated with an organisation where there was a conflict, but that had occurred since they were asked to declare their conflicts. So we just need to perhaps think about the cadence with which we do that. But it's an important point. I think we need to stay really clean on it, and it's a really good reminder, which we'll pass on to all of our senior managers and elected members, to just continue to be vigilant about declaring those conflicts.
Moving on, then the next item was about the CCOs having their reports on the website. I think they're there, but I couldn't find them. Are they there?
They are there. They are there. So our obligation is to make them available. They are always available. There was a couple missing from the website, in particularly, I think in particular relating to the Lake Taupō Protection Trust. So we'll get those documents up there soon. Actually, a lot of those have already been solved. There are a few more on the website at the time the auditors checked.
Okay. In the sensitive expenditure, we had discussed previously, it's been updated. So if we move on to page 41, we now have a non-standard audit report as unqualified because of the response time. You don't have those measures to be able to view. Leon, that's that issue with Downer, I think, only or primarily?
Yeah, primarily, and it's all about evidence and supporting evidence. We couldn't get sufficient evidence to support the reported results by council. Now, I know in discussion with Andrew, council's already working on that, and I'm not sure whether it's going to be completed in time for the 2022 audit or only the 23 audit.
Okay.
Well, I think it'll still be a problem with the 22 audit because some of the financial year will have already, passed by the time that's resolved. But it is improving the situation there. I dare say it'll never quite be 100%, but we are.
Okay. Yep. And that applies to the next item, the wastewater median response times. That's the same issue.
It's the same issue essentially.
Different party, same issue, or is it the same party?
Same
party.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. The water reform. I don't know. Do we want to? I mean, I don't think we've got time to get into that, or can we add anything to it that's of use at the moment? Move on. Uncorrected statements. This is on page 42. There was $18 million miscalculation in the spreadsheet. The only thing I'd take you up on there, Leon, is I don't know if I'd call that immaterial. I think the word's inconsequential. I mean, it's 1% of the council's assets and a lot more as a percentage of other items. So is that reasonable or?
Yeah, it isn't that big in relation. I mean, my own materiality, asset intensive materiality is 100 mil. So right. 18 mil, it's not that big a thing. Yeah.
All right. But the point is it's inconsequential, isn't it? It doesn't really matter.
Well, it's higher than my clearly trivial that we agreed on beginning of the audit.
Okay. The next item, was it to do with a road asset or a water asset?
3 waters.
3 waters. Okay, thank you.
But it's just to be clear, Anthony, it's not to do with a single asset. It's to do with a huge number of assets.
Okay.
That's the challenge with putting that adjustment through. Is it's not one journal entry. It's one journal entry on one side and thousands of journal entries on the other side.
Yeah. Okay. Item 2.3 was the correct misstatements. Does anyone want to see what they were? No. Move on. And a big thank you in item 2.4 for all the time that the staff put in to make that go smoothly for Leon and his team. So we move on to page 43. We've got that issue of performance measures again, so we've covered that off. Page 44, the next item was the revaluation of assets, fair value measurements, which has been done other than that item corrected. Page 45, the capital works program, the carrying forward, in other words, the the project, the capital expenditure has been delayed, and so it's carried forward in our books. The only question I had there was right at the last of the box on the right-hand side, the last paragraph referred to still not enough to meet, and then it goes through and talking about the funding opportunities. What was that saying, that council's missing out on getting some money that they might do, or was it saying council's getting money but not fulfilling their obligations in terms of reporting for that funding?
Yeah, I think, sorry, my internet is acting up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but no, we don't have concerns in that regard. For us, the concern is where you have carry forwards of capital works, at what stage is it going to be so much that it will impact on service delivery? Oh my goodness, what's going on here?
We can hear you okay, and see you.
This thing is, I don't know what's going on. But anyway, I'm back. Yeah, so for us, it's more about if you carry over capital works, at what stage is a road not going to be usable and will impact, therefore, on the service delivery of that road by council?
And so again, Andrew, is that something we feel is of concern? I mean, it's always a risk, but is that a concern?
No, I don't think
you worry about at present.
I don't think it's an immediate concern, but it's right to raise. And we've been signalling this to council for a number of months, probably starting with a workshop back in November last year. We do have a larger than usual capital program, and we built that larger than usual capital program at a time in early 2020 when we thought COVID was going to make private construction drop rather steeply. The opposite's happened. Private construction is booming at the same time that we're trying to deploy this enormous capital program. So really the constraints are external constraints. So there are some internal ones as well, but most of the constraints on us delivering are around availability of labour, skilled labour, availability of materials, and some of that locally is around availability of concrete and steel, which are also in high demand by people building things, geothermal power stations. So at the moment, if you like, our larger than usual bow wave, our larger than usual carry forward is driven by those constraints. But as I said earlier, we're still delivering to our core service requirements.
But I guess to Leon's point, it was that it doesn't get delivered in time, and therefore the service is compromised that we would otherwise have expected or was resolving, and equally that you might actually not get the funding because it's taken so long to do it. None of those are issues.
Not at the moment. They're things that we constantly monitor, and that's part of what Kevin Strongman does in his role.
Okay.
Can I just add to that as well? From my understanding, when we have council meetings, most of our bow wage stuff is also new projects that we've sort of talked about, and we obviously know we can't complete. I haven't had any discussions that I know of that we're actually bow waving any of the infrastructure that's important, not from what I've seen anyway.
Mostly not. That's right, John. Mostly not. We've got things like water compliance infrastructure that we have to build. We prioritise that stuff as much as we can. We like to try and do a balance of things across the community, but there are certain things that are not negotiable that we really need to get done. Where those things are held up and they fall into the bow wave is usually where we've got challenges with getting consents or land access or technical problems like that to resolve.
Okay, still on page 46, we've got the financial system. That's all straightforward, I believe. Page 47, override. I wrote the word sleuthful down here, Leon. I like this. We've incorporated an element of unpredictability into our audit. I just imagine you guys sneaking around the corner and I don't know.
That wording is straight from the auditing standards, and as you can see, the comments we make are not very humorous.
I liked it. Okay, page 48. We move on to some other matters raised. So ACOM provided some recommendations about valuation of roading assets. Is this being done, or is this what's our response been to that? Because I hadn't seen this anywhere else.
it is being worked on, so they've got some items for improvement there, and we'll work through those with ACOM, but really that comes down to staff action and trying to improve in that area, I guess, to make the job easier for ACOM to come up with accurate valuations.
Okay, yep. And we are talking roads, and in the last item they talked about data structures. They were talking about pipes and pump station. Oh no, treatment and pump stations. I know there's pumping water, but what was the treatment station? Is that correct? Or anyway, it's not an issue we need to go through now.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that's referring to.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
ACOM do valuation work for us in relation to water infrastructure. So
yeah. All right. The next item, 4.2, the impact of 3 waters. I note that money's been received by council. Did anyone else have questions or queries about that? No. Capitalisation of internally generated costs of the wages associated with the CapEx program. There's the response to that was management putting together a documentation, so we can just take that as being done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. That'll be
The
a
risk
policy around there.
Yep. The risk register we've already discussed today. The resolution on call-out jobs, we've already talked about that, and training is in process. The high annual leave balances, we've talked about that again. This is on page 51. Depreciation not in line with policy, that's been corrected. So we can move on to page 52, if that's okay. Yep. The public sector audit, there's 5 issues raised here. 5.1 is disposal of vehicles below value. That was an inconsistency in staff documentation, and that's been addressed. Yeah. Sensitive expenditure, independence of approver, that was that one exception. So we've talked about that. The local authority required to provide the documentation for the CCOs. We've got that. 5.4 on page 55, incomplete interest register. We've already talked about that before. The sensitive expenditure, 5.5, that has been undertaken. We move on now to page 58, item 6 or number 6, group audit. We have not identified any issues with those 3 subsidiaries, which is good. Item 7 on page 59. This was new stuff to me here, actually. Procurement response measures. So MB can ask us to come up with some sort of procurement response. Have they done that to date?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Or any councils I'm aware of.
Okay.
More government departments at this stage.
And this is this item here I raised earlier, the quality employment outcomes. This is in the middle of the page here, a new rule. And the second line says, consider quality employment opportunities for New Zealanders. I'm sorry, what is that about? What do we have to do? And are we doing it? I guess is more to the point.
Well, Leon, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but this is in relation to procurement. So I think it's talking about when you're procuring assets, think about buying local, think about creating employment opportunities through your procurement in New Zealand, rather than our direct employment of New Zealanders. Let's think about how do we reflect that in our procurement approach. Our procurement approach already thinks about that. In fact, it thinks our procurement policy thinks local, and the scoring process that we go through when we make procurement decisions thinks about buying local and creating local employment opportunities. So by definition, I think we'd already be doing that, but we'll read the guidance and just double check that.
Okay, so I misinterpreted it. It wasn't about employing people, it was about employment of people within the community.
That's right. It's within those government procurement rule changes.
Yep. Okay. Then we move on to the 5%, I think it was 5% of procurement would be from Maori businesses. Is that in place, and are we doing that, or what's the implications of that for us?
So there's a new procurement rules we'll have to go through and make sure that we're compliant with that, or that we have that target, and we'll reflect that through into our procurement policy.
So correct me if I'm wrong here, but I mean, effectively the procurement criteria would be around, it would have to be an effective procurement. It's got to do the job.
Yep.
It has to be an efficient one. In other words, it's value for money. There has to be some sort of local, I mean, we prefer to have some sort of local employment opportunities around it. And now we want, or we're not, it's not so much want, we have to have 5% would be from Maori businesses.
The way that it's worded there is a target of 5%, but I would have thought locally in our district, we would be beyond 5% already, would be my feeling. Gareth, if you have a view on that, but my gut feel is that we would be well beyond that.
Can I just question that as well? Because it doesn't say anything, as you say, about local Maori business. So where does that, how does that help, if you like, the local economy if you could just buy it from Maori business?
And I think, John, if we reflected that through into our procurement policy, or when we reflect that through into our procurement policy, we would have both of those measures in there. Around Maori business, drawing on the guidelines here, but also continuing to look at local as well. Local is 15% of our decision making at the moment, buying local.
I guess what I mean, I don't know what the mix of your procurement is, and I guess it's also a bit grey as to how to define that sometimes. But I would imagine there's some pretty lumpy, large contractors or providers in there, like the likes of Downers and WSP and that, which are never going to be, well, they're not Maori owned at the moment, probably never will be, may or may not be. But my sort of, not so much concern, but what seemed to me challenging was you could actually say, well, we start out trying to buy 100%, we strip out all the big stuff, which we can't do much about. We've only got a small number left, and now we've got to get 5% of the big number out of that small number. And so you end up with some quite challenging procurement issues, trying to balance out efficiency, effectiveness, local contribution, and Maori ownership, which sort of partly goes to John's question. Is that something that's going to, I mean, I guess if that's an issue, I think it's something we probably need to do more work on. If it's not an issue, well, we just move on.
Yeah, I think I don't know that if it's an issue or not, to be honest, but we need to reflect these new guidelines through into our procurement policy, and then probably do some analysis to see how compliant we are with these guidelines as a starting point, and then work from there. If these are long-term, it's a long-term thing to change the procurement mix, not least of which because most of our contracts are multi-year contracts. But we have great opportunities locally to work with Maori businesses, and our recent sort of our ongoing negotiation with Ngāti Tūwharetoa around the occupation of a new council administration building in 2 years' time is a really good example of that. It's a great opportunity. It's a really good win-win, and so, it's a substantial transaction for us and for them. So.
I'm just looking for I go back to our work plan earlier. You don't have to go look for it, but we had the procurement policy is down for July 2024 review. In other words, 2 years' time. I go back to the question I sort of raised then, is this something we need, do we need to bring this forward and have a closer look at this whole procurement issue?
I'd say so. I mean, these new guidelines that Leon's highlighted for us, we will work through them. But we'll just work through them and see whether there are changes to our policy that need to be made. If there are, then we will bring them up. But that's the same with all of our policies. If we get new guidelines, we go through them, we check them against the policy we have, and if we have to review them ahead of time, we do.
Okay. All right. Is that it? Anyone else want to make any further comments there, or we move on? Okay, that's page 60, 61, 62, 63, and 64 and 65 I will pass over quickly if that's all right. I mean, they are very, very useful documents, and I have looked at some of them, not all of them, but I don't think we need to take that any further just yet. We move on to the appendix, 25 recommendations, some of which are closed. This is page 66. We've talked about the wastewater fault already, the electronic purchase order. Again, to come up with procurement, the last bullet point there at the bottom left-hand side of the page, consideration is given for the procurement policy to include the requirement for an underlying contract for all suppliers with an annual spend greater than a set amount. Is that something we're doing, or wish to take up that recommendation in consideration? Or should we just put that in the basket of having, when we look at the procurement policy, we consider that item as well?
Yeah, maybe I'm not sure I understand what that means actually. I might have to.
Well, I presume we're buying something regularly from someone. We haven't got a contract. Let's formalize it as an ongoing contract. Yep. I think that's what it means. Yeah.
That's exactly what it means. And I agree with you. It's probably worthwhile when looking at all these procurement rules and changes to procurement to look at it at one stage instead of trying to cover every single thing off. And quite a few of this we expect will be solved or cleared with the implementation of the new FMA system.
Okay. So Leon, just while you're there, so right at the start, Danny raised this issue of control approach versus substantive approach. Can you, as we're going through this, can you just remind you, can you just indicate what you meant by that? Which ones of these are you saying are flagging this is going to make it so much easier for you to do your audit through a controlled approach? So presumably that item about the purchase order system is an example of that.
I've lost your agenda, so I've got luckily a hard copy of my report. Right. So I don't know which page I'm on, but under the on my page 33, under necessary, yes. So it will be the review of the payroll master file changes. Also the information system and technology change management processes.
Okay, we'll just hold that thought and we'll come back to it. Okay, so we're going to move on to page 33 now, which is page 67 of our document. We talked about the water supply and wastewater resolution times. We sorted that. The payroll master file changes. That's this item you're referring to right now, Leon. That's going to come through with Quantum. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can tick that off. And then below that, formalized information system. Is that something that Quantum's about to fix?
No, that's something that we're fixing, I guess, in parallel with Quantum around our change management procedures.
Okay, and that goes to Leon's point earlier about having the controls in place, which not to make the audits, it'll make the auditing system. It's not the reason to do it. That's
largely the case with the payroll master file one particularly. Okay. The payroll area was an area where they weren't happy to take a system approach. They took a substantive approach, particularly because of that master file maintenance issue, but that will be resolved with Quantum.
Yep. Good. Page 68 then, business continuity. We have a plan in place. The issue raised here was, have we tested it by various departments? Is that something we need to be doing, want to be doing, are doing?
Jamie, did you want to talk to that one?
Yes, that is something. Sorry, I'm on mute.
No, you're not actually.
Oh. That is something we do have a business continuity policy and a corporate plan in place. It is something which needs testing across the various departments. It's one of the key ones we have done in the past is done some testing with ICT. Again, but we're probably overdue for doing some more testing.
Okay, so we'll say that's a matter in hand. The service request work order, that's going to be a Quantum issue. Quantum's going to resolve this order system.
Yes.
Yeah, no, okay. Project management. The issues seem to be there about matching the projects to the strategic benefit, the benefits and the strategy of the organisation. This, by the way, our notes. What is that? That's 8 years old.
Yeah.
Can we resolve this one, please? Seems a bit long to have something on the list. Either it's either an issue and we need to agree it's not an issue, or it is an issue and we need to do something about it. Which is the likely?
Yep, we'll take that up with Andrew and his team.
Okay.
Just look through what is the final few things that we still require to take to clear it.
We've made a good number of improvements to the way that we manage projects in the past, I'd say 12 to 18 months. So the establishment of a high quality suite of reporting for the project governance group, which is the exec, the establishment of the PMO, which is led by Penel, and who are a really capable team. So we are improving the way that we manage projects, including how we match benefits against what's been achieved by the project. So we can go back and have a look at this one, but I think it's probably written in a different context for the council, in a different context of how projects were managed, as you say, 8 years ago.
Move on. Page 69, completeness evaluations. I think this goes back to ACOM's recommendations, or is it something different?
No, this was something different we picked up during our 2020 audit. We understand the matter has been resolved now, but we want to see another eroding asset revaluation, which is happening this year. And once we work through that, we expect to be able to clear this one.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And the next one.
Oh, that goes for the valuer's recommendation about eroding assets as well. Yep. WSPs. Yep, thank you. All right, we can move on to page 70. Journals are independently, we're almost there. Journals are independently reviewed before they are posted. The adoption of the new accounting system, this will resolve that.
Through the chair, I can answer that question.
Okay.
With CIA, now all journals are approved before they're posted because it's all done electronically.
Yep.
So we raise a journal, someone approves it, and then it gets posted. So we can't post them any other way.
So effectively that's closed now.
Yep.
Bribery and corruption. What was this? We will review our fraud policy. Was that on our list, Jamie? Sorry, I've forgotten. Fraud policy is not down to review this year. It's down for 2024. So which is it?
It must have been reviewed last year. Sorry.
Okay, can you just check that later on and make sure that's...
It's a matter of auditor workload. They're looking to review that again. I think we've done our policy review. Auditors are looking to...
okay. We as the auditors. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Centralized contracts register. Quantum's going to solve that problem.
Correct, yeah.
Correct. Procurement and contract management. So talk about guidance and review of procurement contracts. So we put that in the basket of we're going to look at procurement and consider whether we need to have another fuller review of it. That's correct, Andrew?
Yeah.
Yep.
Just a note, Mr. Chair, this is a beneficial finding. So we don't see this as a significant issue.
Oh, true. Yeah, yes. But it's I was just looking at that bigger picture of all those procurement issues together. Yeah.
That's right.
So long service leave calculation we've talked about. I'm sure it's been calculated somehow. And all the rest have been closed. The only thing I'd note out of that was on page 73, we've closed off this conflicts of interest matter, and yet it's still coming up. So it looks as though it's not been completely closed. It's something we've already talked about and will be addressed. And then sensitive expenditure improvements we have already looked at. So apologies for the having to go through item by item, but it seemed to me there was a lot of issues in there, and unless we did it in a methodical manner, it was a danger of something being missed. It might have been quite material. Any further comments that people might have? Questions of Leon? Or? All right. Thank you, Leon. Do I have someone please move and second that we receive Leon's report? So Danny's got a thumbs up and Anna I can see with a hand up. So thank you, Leon. Thank you for the hard work you've done and thank you for your presence today.
Thank you very much. See you.
Okay, see you. So I now call a close to the open part of the meeting. I notice we are live on YouTube.